All right, we got another collaboration here. This is going to be fun. Larry Krueger joins the show ahead of 49ers Giants, and it's been a really quick week and kind of fun, Larry. I know that the team probably doesn't enjoy preparing for the zone read on a short week, but the 49ers beat the Rams on Sunday, and here we are talking on Wednesday. Feels like that was just about 20 hours ago, but it's already the eve of the game. And these short weeks in the NFL are brutal, but for the fan, well, at least you get your fix of football twice in about a 5-day period. You ready for this one?
Yeah, I'm ready. I don't know if the Niners are ready. That's the question. All they've really done is walkthroughs. But this is the nature of the beast, right? You play on Sunday, you play on Thursday. They're off on, if you play on Sunday, you're off on Monday. So then you have Tuesday's got to be your day, and then Wednesday you're off the day before the game. You're playing Thursday, you're off Friday. So I mean, the coach where it's really rough, Dave, is if you're a coach, because I guarantee you the Niner coaches basically got off the bird from LA, went right to the office, and are just basically staying there.
Sleeping there, yeah.
They stayed there all
They've got
Monday and
coaches
all
for that.
Tuesday.
Yep. Kyle Shanahan has talked about that before. On these short weeks, he'll sleep on the couch in his office. So
I believe it.
very possible he's been there since they landed from LA on Sunday night. And, the reason I brought up the zone read is that's obviously unconventional to prepare for. And I do think the 49ers have a lot of catch-up cramming to do this week because remember the last time they faced the zone read was in week 3 of the preseason with Max Duggan and the Chargers. And Steve Wilkes straight up said after the 49ers struggled against the zone read that they didn't prepare for it because it was the preseason. I think that might be something they regret because, you looked at the schedule. They weren't going to get the zone read from Pickett. They weren't going to get the zone read from Matthew Stafford. But Daniel Jones runs a lot of zone read. Maybe they should have been preparing for that a little bit sooner. Regardless, they have to cram it all into this week. And I think, they're 10-point favorites, the 49ers are. The only realistic path to victory for the Giants in an upset I see through the zone read in this game. No Saquon Barkley, no Andrew Thomas, their starting left tackle. If the Giants are going to hold off this 49ers pass rush, I think Daniel Jones is going to have to pick up big yards on the ground. And that's the one thing the 49ers need to work on snuffing out this week. Otherwise, I see massive advantages for them across the board.
I do too. What was interesting about this last game against the Cardinals, the Giants in 2 games, despite the fact they were like 13th in the NFL last year in sacks, and they brought back the same crew. They don't have Azeez Ojulari. He's hurt. Mm-hmm. But Kayvon Thibodeau and their pass rush has been totally non-existent. Now, part of it was Dallas got a big lead on them in the first game, and so did Arizona in the second game. But, I mean, they're not putting any pass rush at all. And Wink Martindale, brought the house in the second half. He just kept blitzing and blitzing and blitzing against Arizona. And they've got a young corner named Jason Pinnock who they really love to utilize as a blitzer off the edge. He was really good in the run blitzes. He had 2 or 3 big run blitzes. 13 tackles, 3 tackles for loss. So to me, that's kind of the wild card factor, Dave, is like, does Kayvon Thibodeau suddenly get fire up and start sacking the quarterback? If that happens, that will be a very bad sign for the Niners because the Giants have not been able to get any kind of a pass rush going in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, and that first week that we saw them just get destroyed by the Cowboys 40-0. I mean, every single aspect of the game the Giants failed at. And then they were failing at every single aspect of the game for a while against a very bad Arizona Cardinals roster. And we have verification that the Cardinals roster isn't very good because they're just hungry, poaching all of the 49ers leftovers here. We saw them add another player from the 49ers just this past week in Quantrez Knight, who the 49ers obviously liked. He was on their practice squad, but they weren't able to fit him on their 53. Arizona brings Quantrez over to be on their active roster. They had already picked up Ilm Manning. They'd already picked up Keith Ishmael. So this team of 49ers practice squatters at best, right? The Arizona Cardinals was up 20 plus on the New York Giants. And, some people will say, well, that was a hell of a comeback from Daniel Jones. I think that the fact that the Giants were down by 20 plus to begin with against a team like the Cardinals after losing 40-0 to the Cowboys the week before, I think that speaks louder volume here, right? And I mean, nothing has really gone right for these guys except for the comeback against a very bad Cardinals team. And now they're on the West Coast. They didn't even have a chance to go home. They stayed out here in the Pacific time zone. Now they have to play a 49ers team while they're very shorthanded, and the 49ers are essentially 100% healthy. It seems like there's even a decent chance that Brandon Ayuk does play for the 49ers.
Well, the first half against the Cardinals was a nightmare for the Giants. I mean, their entire half was plagued by drop passes, costly penalties, stupid penalties, 12 men on the field penalties,
Yeah.
missed tackles, poor tackling. They also had a turnover. They gave up, 5 yards a carry to James Conner, and a lot of that came in the first half. There was a Daniel Jones to Saquon Barkley pass that he tipped up in the air, and Jalen Thompson intercepted it and ran it back 30 yards or so to give them great field position. But yeah, I mean, when you're down, 20-0 to Joshua Dobbs, who has never won as a starter in the NFL, that's not good. But it's amazing. It was like a tale of two halves for Jones. First play of the second half, he goes up top to Jalen Hyatt, the rookie wide receiver, for a 58-yard bomb. And if you told me what was the number one difference, first half, second half, Giants, Cardinals, I would say it was explosives. Cardinals had no explosive plays in the second half. The Giants had multiple explosive plays. And I'll tell you, the other thing that's really a factor here is that, now I always called him Okereke, but is it Okereke or
he changed his pronunciation from Stanford?
Okay,
it was Okereke when he was at Stanford, but he's gone to Okereke now, I believe.
Okereke. Well, Bobby
that threw me
Okereke.
off. I was like, "Well, these announcers are getting the name wrong," and then I actually read that he changed the pronunciation because they found that like the way that his ancestors pronounced it was different than what they did at Stanford. So
he's a good player.
Yeah,
he's
good
fast and
Bobby.
Yeah.
Okereke or
Okereke. He had 8 tackles. Yeah. He had a tackle for a loss. He's really good in coverage. But this Giant team should be like the two areas where the Niners are incredible is the defensive line, and look at the Giants offensive line trying to block it. They got a rookie center, they've got injured guys, and then the other real advantage for the Niners is anytime you've got McCaffrey, Ayuk, or Debo, or even Juwan in a pass pattern. I mean, this Giants secondary, they've got 2 rookie corners. They got a Dory Jackson who's just been lit up. I kind of think Juwan Jennings is going to have a huge day against a Dory Jackson. If I'm the 49ers, I don't even know if I would play Brandon Ayuk. I kind of think Ronnie Bell might be. They got Trey Hawkins and Deontay Banks, and Banks has got good size. But you're talking about 2 rookie corners and then a slot corner in Jackson, who just has been roasted so far. Then you mix in the fact that the strong safety Xavier McKinney is a real gambler, and I just think the Niners have a huge advantage. Niner D-line against their O-line, Niner receivers against their secondary.
Well, last year the Giants were number 29 defensively, and the defense adjusted value over average. And I haven't seen any signs of improvement as you're going through this line. I mean, they've got a couple players up front, right? They have Dexter Lawrence.
Yep.
They have Leonard Williams up on front too. He can rush the passer. We know that those are 2 guys that could potentially take over a game if you don't have the scheme and the blockers to take care of them. But I do think that the 49ers have both of those things. But, on the back end, the struggles of Adoree Jackson have been very, very well documented. And I think on a Thursday night, these are games where there's not a lot of recovery time. Players are bruised. You typically see more offense on Thursday nights because it's tougher to play defense when there is some sense of physical exhaustion. I think the really physical players like Juwan Jennings, you just mentioned him. I think you're spot on with that, Larry. I think this could be a big game for him. Because Jennings made 2 big catches against the Rams. People really aren't talking about this. We could talk about Brock Purdy right now. This is a nice pivot. Everybody's saying, well, Brock Purdy missed 3 deep passes. He also connected on 2 passes downfield, connected to Juwan Jennings right ahead of halftime. That was a massive catch that ultimately set up the quarterback sneak in the touchdown. And then he found Juwan Jennings on his last deep pass of the game, 31 yards down the sideline, really well thrown back shoulder pass. And, not to mention the PI that they drew against Deebo Samuel to set up the touchdown there at the end of the first half. So there was some good downfield stuff in the pass game for the 49ers. And two of those plays came from Jawan Jennings, who I also thought was tasked with a very difficult run blocking game plan. They sent Jennings in motion time and time and time again. And I'm not sure that like the casual viewer understands how tough it is to execute some of those blocks. When you're flying in motion before the snap, to be able to target somebody while you're moving that fast, the coordination it takes, the geometry, the command of geometry that it takes is really impressive. And Jennings was a mauler out there on Sunday. So anyway, long story short, I think he's going to be a mauler out there on Thursday because the last thing a bruised defense wants to face is Jawan Jennings coming down like a freight train from motion on some of those outside zone blocks.
Well, and you know, here's the other one. It's another angle on this thing that I think is really a nightmare for the Giants. You've got Brock Purdy, who's been incredible. Basically, you know, he was very hard on himself and very critical of himself after the last game. I mean, Brock Purdy is 9-1 straight up in his career. He's 9-0 straight up in games that he's finished. And then I went and looked up what he did, what he's done at night, because sometimes night games are a little bit different than day games. This is Purdy's third NFL night game. He's 2-0 so far. Then I went back and looked at what has he done in primetime games in college at night. He went 6-0. So, you know, Brock Purdy, you got Brock Purdy coming off a game where he played poorly and somehow the Niners scored 30. So he's kind of dialed in. You could see how focused he was yesterday at the podium, and you got guys kind of circling around him, backing him up like Debo, going, "Hey man, this is our guy. This guy, you know, he takes ownership of his failures, and that's why he's such a leader, and that's why he's one of our captains, is because he didn't say, hey, it's this guy or that guy or point the finger. He's like, hey man, it's me. And was he really that bad last week? I mean, he didn't turn it over on the road against a D-line that includes maybe the greatest defensive lineman that ever played, and Aaron Donald. So I think Purdy's in the right frame of mind, or the wrong frame of mind if you're a New York Giant fan. And the Niners, the other factor here is that New York has yet to produce even one sack so far. They're like one of only a few teams in the NFL that doesn't have a sack, and they've allowed 273 rushing yards, seventh most in the NFL. So, you know, the Niners, I think on offense, it's going to be a little bit of, what do you want to do? You know, do you want to run it? Do you want to run it with McCaffrey? You want to run it with Mitchell? Do you want to run it with Debo? Do you want to pick on a secondary that's totally depleted with your big-time weapons? To me, the only equalizer here will be turnovers and sacks. If somehow Thibodeau got rolling, if somehow the turnovers, the ball bounced funny, it's an NFL game, anything can happen. Otherwise, I think this is a major advantage Niners, and I can see why it's a 10-point spread.
And there's no gateway to sacks if the 49ers are running it down their throat, right?
Right.
You have to stop the run to have some fun. That's what Arden Key used to say around the 49ers building, and I don't see a pathway for the Giants to stop the run. Now, the key is the same for the 49ers, though. That's why I said the only legitimate path I see for the Giants to win this game is through the zone read, is through Daniel Jones taking off and running, because if that happens, then the 49ers haven't stopped the run, and that means you can't get after Daniel Jones. You know, Daniel Jones has the third slowest release time, which is snap to release over the past 3 years. Nothing against him, like skill-wise, it's just the style that he plays with. He likes to scramble. He likes to let things develop, see if he can run a little bit. But, I mean, I think this season it's only Justin Fields that has a slower release time, and I think that Kenny Pickett is right in there with a slow release time. We already saw what the 49ers did to him in week 1. So I don't think that you can reasonably expect this next opponent for the 49ers to be able to emulate what their last one, the Rams, were able to do, and that was the quick game from Matthew Stafford. You know, we could talk about that right now, Larry, and I want to revisit in a little bit.
By the way, Jones is 1 for 11. He's 1-11 in night games.
Okay, so let's talk about it right now.
He does not play well in primetime.
I was about to bring up a primetime record of interest, because everybody likes to say, oh, Kyle Shanahan loves Kirk Cousins And, can Brock Purdy usurp that coveted position in Kyle Shanahan's head over Kirk Cousins, who's going to be a free agent this offseason? Well, you're talking about how good Purdy is in primetime so far. And he had a major coming out party on primetime last year against the Seahawks. That's when he earned the 49ers trust by playing through the cracked rib. So Purdy undefeated in primetime. He's undefeated, period, if he finishes a game healthy. Cousins only 11-19 in primetime. Remember the big issue with Kirk Cousins is primetime, and now you're saying Daniel Jones is a big issue, 1-9 in primetime as well.
1-11 straight up in night games.
In night,
so
okay,
1-11 in night games for Daniel Jones. But you're right, Dave. I mean, if you watch Daniel Jones, his highlight reel looks impressive. He's 6'5", he's 225, he throws a great ball, and he can run like the wind. It's like I can see why people were so enamored with him. And when he looks good, he looks really good. And when he looks bad, he looks really bad. I mean, he's been a turnover machine his whole career. He's been sacked 10 times already this season, second most in the NFL. But when he takes off and starts to run, you got to take good angles, because even though he's 6'5", I think guys see a 6'5" quarterback start to run and they think, oh, he's probably this speed. But in reality, he's that speed. And if you take the wrong angle, then you can take a 5-10 yard run, and all of a sudden it's a 40-yard run. So to me, taking the proper angles on Daniel Jones, taking more conservative angles on him, just acknowledging that he's not just like any other quarterback who can run. He's fast. I mean, he's a big guy who can really run.
And he's not afraid to bypass slide opportunities. If you watch the tape on Daniel Jones, like a lot of these defenders are now conditioned for these quarterbacks to just slide anytime a defender gets near them. But it's such a big part of Daniel Jones' livelihood. Only Lamar Jackson has scrambled more this year as far as percentage of scrambles per drop back go. So it's such a big part of his livelihood that he's taken advantage of the fact that defenders are conditioned to let up when these quarterbacks slide, and he'll keep on running. So, yeah, I do think that the conservative angles are a good idea so he doesn't burn you. Also, with the conservative angles and just in general conservative play around Daniel Jones, you could kind of insulate yourself against him cutting back when you would expect him to give up if it were any other quarterback, right? So I think that this is definitely going to be a test for the 49ers that will be a relatively unique one. There are a lot of quarterbacks that can move, but again, they do play Lamar Jackson later in the season. That's going to be Monday Night Football on December 25th, Christmas Day. That's still a while away. Daniel Jones, though, can move. I still remember that was his rookie year, right, when he had that big run on, I think it was a primetime game, and he just tripped maybe 10 yards away from the end zone. That probably will replay forever. That one was funny.
He's a major talent. He's a major talent. And the other thing he has here is he's like very defined as far as his weapons. Like Darius Slayton and Paris Campbell, they drop the ball. I mean, those guys drop the ball. But Jalen Hyatt's got great vertical ability down the field. And then now they have Darren Waller. They didn't trade very much to get Darren Waller, but they have Darren Waller, and they have the kid from Berean High School out here in Walnut Creek, Isaiah Hodgins, who you remember in the Pac-12 at Oregon State. Yep. And Hodgins, in a lot of ways, might have been their best receiver at the second half of last year. And Hodgins and Waller give Jones two big receivers with outstanding ball skills. So that's, to me, what you got to defend. On third down with no Barkley, you got to defend four things. Daniel Jones running it, the deep ball to Hyatt, and you got to be draped all over Darren Waller and Isaiah Hodgins. And it will be interesting to me, Dave, to see, does Wilkes, who we don't know a lot about as far as his tendencies, they went from playing a lot of zone against Puka Nacua in the first half. Then you heard Kyle say, hey, man, we need to tighten it up. I mean, they should have tightened it up early. They should have gone man-to-man. They went man-to-man a lot in the second half. I'll be interested to see, did the Niners try to go man against Waller and Hodgins and try to hug up on these guys? Because they can't really run by you. But if you don't cover them and give them no space, they can play pitch and catch to those two guys all day.
Well, the Rams game is really interesting to me. This starkly illustrates the change in strategy. The 49ers blitzed on 5% of dropbacks in the first half, and then Steve Wilkes blitzed on 30% of dropbacks in the second half. So 6x increase in blitz rate, and they needed to do that But I think that there are only a few quarterbacks in the NFL that would have been able to execute the Rams game plan against the 49ers successfully. And Matthew Stafford was one of them. And he didn't even execute it successfully for the whole game. He executed it successfully for about a half. And that was short game, short game, short game, get rid of the football before the defensive line can get to you. And he took advantage of some of that loose coverage that you're talking about on the back end. They tightened things up at halftime. And then all of a sudden it became a lot tougher for Matthew Stafford to hit that first read with a precision throw. And I think, as long as you maintain control over the explosives as a defense, you maintain control in the short game over yards after the catch. Yak is the one way that you could turn a short pass into an explosive. What you do is you force an opposing offense to string together really long drives of perfection to move the ball down the field. And that's what the Rams did for 3 drives in the first half. It was a lot of short stuff, not a lot of yak, but a lot of perfection. But ultimately, Larry, I think the probability catches up with you if you're an offense doing that. Because ultimately, over the sample of 40 to 60 plays, there's going to be one where there's a drop, it pops up into the air, and the defense picks it off. And that's exactly what happened in 49ers Rams when you saw Kyron Williams and that ball clang off his hands and Isaiah Oliver picked it off. So the 49ers, I thought there were obviously a lot of holes in coverage in the first half, but they didn't give up these gashing massive plays, and they gave themselves enough time to make the adjustments on the back end to where then the picks started coming in the second half. The Rams ran out of gas, and I don't think that Daniel Jones can challenge this defense in quick release, accurate fashion like multiple arm angle Matthew Stafford could. And because of that, I see the breaking point for the Giants passing attack coming earlier against the 49ers. And I also expect the 49ers to be more on top of the adjustments a little bit sooner now that Steve Wilkes has a couple games with this team under his belt.
Yeah. I mean, the big question with the Niners is they're a little bit thin on the corner. They've lost Womack to the IR, at least short term. They cut Deshaun Jameson, so they don't have quite the same depth. Ambry Thomas, I know, is battling a knee injury, so I don't know if he's going to be able to go. So you're looking at, obviously Mooney Ward, who has a lot of groin issues, but it seems like he's ready to roll right now. And then you got Oliver and Demo Anor, but he also was a little dinged up. I kind of wonder, are we going to see Anthony Brown in this game? I mean, they just signed him. He tore an Achilles last December in week 13. So, I mean, he probably, here we are, it's September 20th. Odds are that he's not fully recovered necessarily from that Achilles injury. So I'm eager to see if Lenore can go. To me, that's a major decision. If somehow we get to game time and Diamador Lenore is compromised or can't go, and Ambry Thomas can't go, that would be a concern because they're now starting to lose a number of guys at one position.
Yeah, Ambry Thomas was listed as a limited participant in. Kicked you off there, Larry. Sorry about that. Ambry Thomas was listed as a limited participant there for the 49ers in the very slow walkthrough practice the other day. So was Brandon Ayuk. But you're right. I want to put this back up on the screen when we look at the 49ers cornerback depth. You're absolutely right. I think this is the soft spot of the football team. Thomas on the outside, Diamador Lenore shifting between outside and inside. Isaiah Oliver, I thought that was big for the 49ers, that he played such a good game against the Rams. It wasn't just the interception. It was the open field tackle of Kyron Williams on third down that really turned that defensive effort around. And then he was a missile, and Isaiah Oliver did a lot of this on tape in Atlanta. He was kind of this glorified linebacker. Run blitzes were big for him, and he was a heat-seeking missile on those run blitzes. I think the 49ers really loved that on tape, and he helped seal the game with a fourth down stop off of a run blitz. So we all know that Isaiah Oliver has had a tumultuous offseason. The 49ers partially benched him. They started messing around with Diamador Lenore at nickelback. Well, the fact that Isaiah Oliver, I think, has got some confidence now under his feet, and the 49ers have confidence in him, that gives them a little bit more optionality on the back end, even if there are some injuries, even if there is a question about Ambry Thomas's availability. Samuel Womack's obviously going to be out for a few weeks. I think the 49ers just need to build a bridge right now to about week 5, because week 5 is when I anticipate them to get Darrell Luter Jr. the rookie back. And Darrell Luter Jr., he's going to be a versatile guy. I think they think he's going to be able to handle both inside and out. Probably with the long arms, you're thinking of him more as an outside cornerback. But he's on PUP, or not PUP. He's on NFI right now because he came into the season hurt after a injury during OTAs. And he's been healthy, I think, for a while. But the rules of the list are that you have to be on it for at least the first 4 weeks of the season. Then they can activate you in week 5. So look for week 5 to be a time when the 49ers, can start really fortifying this defensive back room with players coming off of the injury list. That's Darrell Luter Jr. And over the course of the season, I wouldn't be surprised if they're not finished in that cornerback position. They players that they've waived in the past year, like Terrence Mitchell, they had this offseason. They've run guys through the building over the course of the offseason that I don't think they would be too shy in bringing back if they need to bring those guys back.
And Josh in the chat says, are you kidding, Larry? They wouldn't sign Brown if he wasn't recovered. I just talked to Brown yesterday in the locker room. I don't know that they worked him out. I know that he had a physical, so they gave him a physical. But I guess times have changed, and maybe I should get with the times, but I'm just so conditioned to an Achilles being like a career ender that when a guy has an Achilles and he's back on the field competing at a position like corner where you don't know what direction you're going to go in next. So you have to really have a lot of looseness to every aspect of your hips, your ankles, you've got your knees. You have to be able to be really fluid. They saw him this summer. He was in camp with Pittsburgh for a month. So maybe they have some film on him, or maybe they have a good report on him. I'm sure they did not sign him if he wasn't healthy. I'm sure that they knew he was healthy. I'm just not sure how much he's lost or hasn't lost. To me, it's still, Michael Crabtree was the first guy that I could remember, Dave, who had an Achilles, who played on the perimeter and came back and seemingly got it all back. But Anthony Brown, maybe, he suffered it was literally the same week that Brock Purdy stepped in as the quarterback against Miami. That was the same weekend Brown went down with the Achilles. And here we are, not even a full calendar year later, and he's already, back playing, and he's been playing this summer. So, it's the beauty of modern medicine that these procedures just get better and more refined and less intrusive and less career ending as time goes on. But I'll still, I almost have to see it to believe it. I have to see Anthony Brown out there mirroring NFL caliber receivers up and down the field before I actually will believe that he's recovered from this injury.
And I think the 49ers will think the same thing. They didn't take a massive risk on this guy. They signed him off of Pittsburgh's practice squad. There's a difference between being healthy and medically cleared and being ready to play in an NFL game. And nobody has seen this guy play in an NFL game since his injury. He was on Pittsburgh's practice squad. So I think you're absolutely right. I think the 49ers are taking a bit of a flyer. But why not take a flyer on a guy who, when we last saw him in a full season, 2021, had 4 picks and 12 pass breakups for the Cowboys? The passer rating into Anthony Brown's coverage in 2021 was like 82.4, which by today's standards is excellent. So, he's got the savvy of a veteran. He's 29 years old. And if he comes back to 80 to 85% of what he was before, he can be a contributor for the 49ers. Now, they just have to see if this flyer is going to work out. So I think in an ideal world, the 49ers win the next couple of games in blowout fashion, and you could throw Anthony Brown out there in garbage time against the Giants and the Cardinals and see what he's all about on the field. But, to your other point, yes, the medical procedures for these Achilles injuries are improving rapidly. You saw Aaron Rodgers, he's planning to do an internal brace for his Achilles. Internal brace is what Brock Purdy did for the UCL, the elbow. And that was relatively new. The first quarterback to ever do the internal brace procedure instead of Tommy John was Nick Mullins after he got hurt in 2018. And Mullins made a very fast recovery. Brock Purdy's recovery was even faster. I think 4.5 months was the time from surgery to the beginning of 49ers training camp. And based on what I've heard, Purdy would have been ready to go even sooner, had training camp begun sooner for the 49ers. So now Aaron Rodgers is going to be taking the internal brace technique to his Achilles. And we'll see if that speeds up the Achilles recovery times. So it is fascinating. You can't apply the old timelines to modern football. And I don't think, and again, you can't be sure about anything until a guy actually steps back out onto the field. So even these teams like the 49ers, they can run a physical, they can do all that, but they can't simulate actual game reps until those game reps happen. But sometimes it is worth taking a flyer on a guy, especially if he's the 53rd man currently on your roster.
I was talking to some people with the Warriors because, Klay Thompson blew out his Achilles, Dave, and that I was told that you don't see recurring Achilles ruptures because they lock the Achilles together when they repair it. So like there's almost no way for you to tear your Achilles on the same side a second time because your Achilles is kind of locked in there. I don't know the medical exact terminology, but from what I was told, once you rupture an Achilles, if they do a certain kind of procedure, your chances of having a recurring injury there are almost nil. The interesting thing about Anthony Brown is that when he came out of college, guy ran 4.35. He had a 35.5-inch vertical. He had 19 reps on the bench. So he was an elite athlete with elite physical traits. And I think the Niners are gambling on that because they brought in Bradley Roby. Roby's 31. They brought in Brown. Brown's 29. And it's interesting. I mean, Roby didn't have nearly the severe injury like this, but obviously they worked Roby out, and maybe they felt like Roby wasn't quite as good. So, the Niners need, I sit there and go, wow, did they really need Pryor and Jalen Moore? Do they really need 4 backup offensive linemen? Shouldn't they have just kept Deshaun Jameson? In hindsight, I think we would all agree with that now, but they hedged a little bit. They gambled with the extra offensive linemen. They let go of Jameson. And here we are 2 weeks in, and it's kind of already come back to bite them a little bit.
Yeah, and also we're still only 2 weeks in, as you just said, and this is a marathon of a season. And the one position that's in really short supply across the entire NFL is offensive line. I mean, teams are hurting because they don't have enough quality offensive linemen. And you think the 49ers situation is tough right now with Spencer Burford struggling a little bit at right guard. Well, you're going to see something a whole lot worse with the New York Giants this week. They're going to be missing their starting left tackle. We talk about the young center starting. We talk about the fact they've already benched their right guard, their week 1 right guard, Mark Lewinsky. They benched him, and then he had to come in to fill in for injury at left guard. It's been ugly, I think, both weeks for the Giants. It was a lot uglier the first week. They got up 39 pressures to the Cowboys. So, I mean, the Giants are going to be a nice illustration of these offensive line issues around the league are wild. I mean, they're bad. And I think that's why the 49ers erred on the side of keeping more linemen. And I think we'll get a final verdict on what the right move was based on what happens over the long run of the season, right? Because the 49ers have dealt with this before. O-line injuries have scuttled this team. I still remember 2020 when they're on their 4th string center right here, Hronis Grasu. And that totally sunk the season in week 8. So Nick Zakel's a guy who ultimately they think can play center. They think he'll be able to play guard. They've got 2 tackles in the swing spots, quote unquote swing spots, Jalen Moore and Matt Pryor, and obviously they have Feliciano who could play any of the interior line spots. I've seen offensive line depth issues and injuries derail more Super Bowl contenders than secondary issues. I saw the Kansas City Chiefs lose a Super Bowl badly with Patrick Mahomes under center against the Buccaneers because they were just so depleted along the offensive line. So I understand the prioritization of the offensive line given the climate in the NFL, given the fact that these edge rushers over the past 10 years or so, the proliferation of the athletic edge rusher, just the monster, right? The 245 to 265 pound monster who can run a 4.40. We saw one of those guys in Byron Young last week with the Rams. Yeah. These guys have just outpaced the development of offensive tackles. So now the whole league is scrambling to find good offensive linemen because there's a shortage of them in the league right now. So
because you look at there's a shortage of them walking around the planet. I mean, let's be honest. What is the job description for an offensive tackle? Be 6'6", I mean, if you're 6'4", they really don't want you. They're looking for a 6'6" guy with 34 to 35-inch arms.
Yeah, and I knew this was going to start to become an issue about 15 years ago when I had a great high school team at Mount Whitney High School in Visalia and won the section championship and everything. And we had a couple guys who went to Oregon State to play. One of them name was Kyle Bell, and he started his high school career as a big time wide receiver, 6'5", athletic as hell. By the end of his high school career, they moved him to defensive end. And that had started to become a trend around the league. They're moving these just massive wideouts, guys who are burning cornerbacks, to D end. Drake Jackson's a great example. Drake's dad, Dennis, sent me a video of him back in high school. He's always played D line, but he sent me a video of Drake beating a cornerback in just a 7-on-7 drill at their high school practice. And that corner plays for the University of Arizona now. So Drake Jackson was beating the corner as a receiver. So we've seen back in the 80s and 90s and before then, your linemen would just be big dudes. Your defensive ends would just be big guys. You'd think it's just a muscle battle. About 20 years ago, people started to have the idea, why don't we just put athletes at edge, see what happens? And this is what happens. You don't have enough offensive linemen that are Trent Williams to be able to block these guys consistently.
Right. To the point where I almost, if I was John Lynch, might just take one of my scouts and say, hey, you know what? I'm taking you off of the, the Southwest region, and I'm going to have you scout failed NBA prospects. Because, ultimately, when you're looking for a 6'8" guy with great feet and long arms, you're probably going to find them as like power forwards that can't shoot, or small forwards that can't shoot, or maybe even two guards that are bulky and strong but can't necessarily shoot, and they don't have a career in the NBA. I mean, at this point, it's such a difficult thing. I mean, look at Leroy Watson. He was a collegiate tight end at Texas San Antonio, right? University of Texas San Antonio, and now they try to transition him, and I think you're going to see more of that in the years to come, because it's you have the geometry of playing tackle is you have to have long arms. That's part of the reason. I mean, I didn't get this answer from the Niners. I just know it. But that's part of the reason that Il Manning was exposed to waivers, is because even though his experience was at tackle and his best film in the preseason was at tackle and probably in camp, he's got 32-inch arms. So he's never really going to be allowed to play offensive tackle in the NFL. He's strictly a guard or a center, and he hasn't really have any reps at those positions. So he's kind of a, either way you look at it, he's either not what you want at tackle, or he's kind of a developmental player inside. And so I think they gambled. Hey, you know what? We can squeeze this guy through the waiver wire. And the Cardinals' O-line just so bad. They're like, no, we'll take him. So
that's the problem. The Cardinals are so bad that everybody's open to poaching by the Cardinals.
Right.
Then the
Cardinals are looking at the Niners saying, we'll take Quantrez, we'll take Ilman. The one that surprised me the most was Keith Ishmael, because I watched Ishmael all summer. I was just not that impressed with him as a NFL player of at any level, and yet they saw enough there to poach him.
Yeah, I thought that he had some snapping issues. It seemed that whenever he was in there was a lot of fumbled snaps, and tough to know if you should blame it on the QB or you should blame it on Keith. But if he was the common denominator for all those snaps, then some of them must have been his fault. They initially acquired Keith Ishmael. This is funny trivia. 49ers sent a 3rd and a 5th round pick to Washington in exchange for Trent Williams. Washington used the 5th rounder for Keith Ishmael. Then he ended up with the 49ers, but then they waived him, and now he's with Arizona.
Small world. Everything's kind of tied to each other.
It is. Yeah, it absolutely is. But boy, in the context of this D-line discussion, we see why the 49ers strategically are building their roster with an emphasis on the D-line, because they see the comparative advantage. They see the offensive linemen in the league struggling. So that's why, obviously, they've been pouring resources into the edge rushers in this D-line for years, since John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan took over. But I think they shocked a lot of us by going complete top dollar this offseason for Javon Hargrave to make sure I thought they needed to fortify the interior. Their defensive tackles last year had only 3 combined sacks. That wasn't going to cut it all season. But I thought they might get like a B-list free agent. But according to what Jed York said at the owners' meetings, he said if I'm going to be overpaying somebody in free agency, just go and get me the best guy. And John was like, okay, well, we'll go get the best guy. And they got Javon Hargrave, and he's been impressive. Did you see him almost like take the handoff against the Rams?
It was incredible. Yeah, I mean, he's like timing the snap. He's living in the backfield. That could have been a major play. I think, to be honest, Dave, I think this is subtly one of the 49ers' best philosophies, if you want to call it that, is that I think that they're doing free agency better than every team in pro football. And what I mean by that is they understand the reality of free agency, which is it doesn't matter if you're the top guy, the middle guy, or the bottom guy. In a supply and demand free market system, free agents by definition are going to be overpaid. So do you want to overpay a poor player, a pretty good player, a very good player, or the best player? You want to shoot as high as you possibly can. In the last 2 years, they've gone Charvarius Mooney-Ward and now Javon Hargrave. I think it's really smart for two reasons. One, when you pay a free agent on the outside world, you got to overpay to get them. And then they come into your room, and if they're making more than every other guy in their position room, there's resentment there unless they're noticeably better. And that's why Hargrave works, and that's why Mooney Ward works, because Mooney's the best corner they got, and Hargrave's as good a defensive tackle as there is. So these guys can walk into the room. There's no bad vibes. There's no bad blood. There's no resentment. And then the Niners on the back end also then for every one free agent they sign, they're now letting 3 and 4 walk away to other teams, and we saw it again this year. What does that do? That obviously improves your compensatory formula, and then you wind up with great free agents that don't interrupt your chemistry and extra draft choices in the April college draft. Yep. And I think it's one philosophy but has two effects. And I think both of them are hugely positive. You wind up with a younger roster, more draft choices, and cheaper players through the college draft. You wind up with some star talents, and you wind up with very little resentment. You know, I've seen teams that go sign 7, 8, 9 free agents, and all of a sudden their chemistry is terrible within like 6 months because there's all kinds of guys resenting the guys that just walked through the door. And so I think the 49ers, John Lynch as a former player understands the reality of the relationships between the players, and I think they're doing free agency the best of any team in pro football. I think it's a major part of their success equation.
They've built the strongest roster in the National Football League, and they've done it through many of the avenues that you talked about. This was something I got to write about back in April, how John Lynch uses the comp.
I read this. This was a great piece. When was this?
It was in April because I got John one-on-one. We talked about it at the owners' meetings, and it was cool because he one of the things that he emphasized to me is that early on in the regime, Jed York was giving the Brain Trust a lot of grief for not having a comp pick because they didn't have any good players. They didn't have good players leaving. So it took the 49ers a couple years to get their first comp pick. Didn't come until 19 or 20, and now they're just swimming in them. And this is something that the Patriots did to stay on top of the league for 2 decades. This is how you have to do it with the salary cap, because you can't just go and spend unlimited money on everybody. But the 49ers have decided, okay, we'll spend top dollar on A-list players, but then we have to find where we're going to save a little bit of money so we can do that. And where they're going to save money is on the B-list players. And the B-list players, well, they feel that they can replenish with their comp picks, which they get for those B-list players departing. So guys like Charles Omenihu, Sensa Ebukam, those are players that you don't re-sign. You re-sign
Robbie
players
Gould.
who have proven that Jimmy Garoppolo, another good player who's not an A-list player. So all these guys give you picks in the compensatory fashion to be able to replenish. So Jake Moody was a comp pick that the 49ers, and also the coaches get you comp picks too. So through the minority hiring incentive, the coaches leave. So the 49ers have all these comp picks coming in because they're developing both players and staff. That's key too. They develop players and staff, comp picks come in, they replenish the roster, they stay under a rising salary cap, even while they increase the amount of A-list players that they pay on a year-to-year basis. One of the most interesting quotes after they signed Nick Bosa. Kyle Shanahan said, I would like to have one of these every single year. Think back to 2020. George Kittle signed for record money. 2021, Fred Warner signed for record money. 2022, Deebo Samuel signed for huge money. 2023, Nick Bosa signed for record money. What does that mean? If Kyle Shanahan says he wants to have one every year, that means there's going to be somebody in 2024. Brandon Ayuk is going to sign for huge money. If he continues on this path, and right now he's showing that he's an A-lister, if that persists throughout this season, he's going to be the next guy the 49ers pay, and they can fit that within their structure because they're willing to pay top dollar for A-listers they've developed because they're so good with the comp picks to save money on the other end that they have enough money to toss at the premium talent.
And the side effect of it as well is that I saw a list about a month ago of where the 49ers sit as far as the age of their roster. As soon as everybody finalized their roster, they started doing these comps to how many players are homegrown and how young and old, relatively old is your roster. Well, the Niners are considered to be like in their Super Bowl window and maybe towards the back end of their Super Bowl window. But the 49ers are the 26th oldest team in pro football. There's only a handful of teams that have a collectively younger roster than the 49ers. So that's another side effect of these philosophies is that you're right. It puts a lot of pressure on your scouting department because you got to hit on day 3 picks and you got to hit on undrafted free agents. But guess what? Guess what the 49ers do? They hit on day 3 picks and they hit on undrafted free agents. And the result is a lot of the NFL's top tier talent. And if you can hit day 2, day 3, and after the draft, you also have depth and youth. And that's where they're at. They're the 26th oldest roster in pro football.
Wow. That's a great stat. And just shows you the formula is to have these superstars who are obviously going to be older because they have to establish themselves as superstars to be the leaders of the team. You walk through that locker room and it feels like the Pro Bowl. Christian McCaffrey actually told me that last year. I don't want to steal his quote without credit, but it feels like the Pro Bowl when you're in that locker room, but then it's surrounded by youth. And what better way to instill, good culture in the team than by having Trent Williams' locker open for advice, Nick Bosa there, Christian McCaffrey. I could go down the list. All these young guys that filter into the team. That's a championship machine right there because they could sit there and they could learn from the superstar at their position. And literally every single position has got right? An A-lister at this point. Let's go through the positions. Yeah. Offensive line, Trent Williams. Running back, Christian McCaffrey. Brock Purdy's on his way to being an A-lister at quarterback. They really, really like what he's done.
Kittle.
Kittle at tight end. Deebo and Brandon Ayuk at wide receiver. Nick Bosa on the defensive line. Fred Warner.
And Hargrave.
And Hargrave. So you have an exterior and an interior defensive line A-lister. Fred Warner and, Dre Greenlaw by extension is also a good vet in the linebacker room. Charvarius Ward in the cornerback room. And, hey, Talanoa Hufanga might be a little young
get there.
to be the leader, but he's already an all-pro. And Tashawn Gibson, he's got 32 career interceptions. People talk about all the talent on this 49ers team. One of the most impressive resumes on the whole team is the safety that nobody talks about, and that's Tashawn Gibson. So at every single position, they have this pillar, at least one pillar, and then they still manage to have one of the younger rosters in football, thanks to the number that you brought up right there. So if that's not a formula for sustained success, I don't know what is.
Yeah. No, and still this is a roster with some high-end young players. Jair Brown, Ronnie Bell, Braden Willis, D. Winters, Jalen Graham might be the best of all of them. Jake Moody. There's some really good young players. Darrell Luter might be a player. Robert Beal Jr. I think showed me some flashes this summer that he's got special edge talent. So, they've got a good equation. It's a well thought out plan. And it just I think they're taking roster building. They're right there. Say what you want about John Lynch. He came into this job with not a lot of front office experience. He was a Hall of Fame safety, but he has grown into this job. He empowers the Adam Peters of the world beneath him. Peters is very well respected. They've got a lot of top tier scouts. They're doing a really good job. They just found a franchise quarterback in the 7th round last year. And they found I think a really nice wide receiver in the 7th round in Ronnie Bell this year. So they're doing a nice job, and all these things ultimately, I think obviously the goal is that it results in a championship, and they've gotten close. And maybe this is the year they kind of push through and get it done.
Yeah, I mean, and you have to have some things fall in your favor for that to happen, no matter how talented your roster is. Health is obviously, I think, at the top of that pecking order. They didn't have it last year at the most important position. So they're trying to fix that this year. They're trying to step forward. If you look at this team right now, we talk about cornerback being a potential weakness. What do you think the second biggest one is? I would have to say right guard. I think Spencer Burford has struggled. I think that week 2 was actually a little bit better than week 1. I know that the PFF grades probably disagree there. He was still losing some battles in pass protection. The one thing with Burford, though, I think his ability to hit the second level on some of these blocks has been really impressive. The best example was the 65-yard touchdown for Christian McCaffrey. He took on a linebacker 4 or 5 yards past the line of scrimmage. It's a really difficult block for any guard to execute. So he can do some of the challenging stuff that Kyle Shanahan asks of him, but they really, really need more consistency, more anchor in pass protection, because that right side is already a question mark with Colton McKivitz. When you get 2 question marks together, that's when problems really start to happen. So far, Brock Purdy's been able to work around it. But, Larry, I really think that if there's something that derails this team while it's healthy, it could be pressure coming from that right side against the team that can really bring that heat. And the Cowboys are looming in week 5.
Yeah, I mean, I really like Burford. I think he's smart. I think in some ways he's a prototype physically. He's 6'4", he's 300 pounds. He's definitely in a much better shape this year than he was last year. He's kind of reproportioned his body a little bit. I guess my bigger concern is not necessarily him. I'm not that concerned about him, because I really think Chris Forster is a great coach. I don't think he's a good coach. I think he's one of the NFL's best offensive line coaches. So I think you got a talented prospect, and you've got a fantastic instructor. Where I'm a little nervous is the defensive ends, because they've got better push inside now with Hargrave, and I love the collection of tackles. Right, you got Hargrave, and you got Armstead, you got Kinlaw playing the best ball of his life. You got Givens and Kalia Davis, who are your one gap penetrators that are both around 285, 295, and can go get the quarterback. But at defensive end, you got Bosa, and then you got Drake, who's didn't play a lot of snaps last year. And then what do you got? You got Cleveland Farrell, who he cannot get. If he beats you around the corner, I think you're still fine. You're really only cooked if he beats you inside, because he doesn't run the loop that fast. And then you got Kerry Hyder. I love the motor, but he doesn't scare anybody, as far as there's no offensive tackle saying, "Oh my God, I got Kerry Hyder tomorrow," and then that's it. I mean, Beal is not there yet, and he's hurt. And to me, especially since last year in the playoffs, Ebukam, Amenahue, and Jordan Willis averaged in their 3 playoff games 91 snaps. And I don't have it. Well, actually, I do have it here. I've got the snap count from the Ram game. Guess how many snaps Nick Bosa played?
35. Well, no, they threw a lot. Yeah, he played way more. He played, because they were throwing a ton. So yeah,
he played 63 snaps. Wow. And when I talked to Koceric about his D line in July, when we had a chance to talk to the coaches, I said, Chris, you got a different looking line this year. You got your number ones are probably the best in all of football. But you don't have Amenahue, and you don't have Jordan Willis, and you don't have Ebukam, and you've lost some of your quality depth. Are you going to play your number ones way more snaps? And he's like, no, I'm not. He goes, if I play my number one guys 70 snaps a game, they won't make it to the playoffs. Yeah. Well, here we are, 2 games in. 2 games in, Bosa played 63 snaps. Armstead played 54. Hargrave played 51, 44 for Farrell, 40 for Drake, 29 for Kinlaw, 22 for Givens, 13 for Hyder. They need John Lynch to make another Amenahue or Jordan Willis kind of addition to this defensive line, or they're not getting to the finish line. They need some other guy off the edge that's got some speed and can make a play. I mean, they brought in Taco Charlton. He looked pretty good. Then he got hurt. They brought in a bunch of guys this summer. None of them panned out. There's no getting around it. I mean, if Nick Bosa even just has a hammy and all of a sudden misses 2 games, they could be really, really hurting for exterior rush. So to me, that's my number one concern is the depth of the defensive ends, because look what left and look what came in and look at the difference. And then you see Bosa playing. I mean, they want to I thought they were going to try to baby Bosa a little bit. 63 snaps for Bosa. And Chris just told me he can't play 7. He doesn't want to run his guys out there 70 snaps. You basically just did.
Yeah, so and you got a Thursday night game coming up.
Right. And so you're always going to need your edge rushers. And so to me, this is another year where John does a great job. And he did a great job to find a Menahue, got him for a 6th. And he did a great job to get Willis, who ran in like 4 5s, and they got him for like a 6th or a 7th. They got a bunch of picks. They ought to trade one of them in a week or 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whenever they need it, between now and the deadline for some edge rusher who's buried on another team's practice squad or depth chart. And, I could see that move coming because they can't continue this pace.
Well, the 49ers have been one of the most aggressive teams in the NFL ever since Shanahan and Lynch took over. There's only been one trade deadline that hasn't seen activity, and that was 2018 when this team was out of it. But in 17, they picked up Jimmy Garoppolo. In 19, they picked up Emmanuel Sanders. Then in 2020 was Jordan Willis. That was, I think, a 7th-round pick swap, and he ended up being a huge contributor for this team. He had the big block against Green Bay in the 2021 playoffs.
Maybe they go for a free agent. Maybe somebody, Randy Daytona in the chat here says JPP, Jason Pierre-Paul. Melvin Ingram's out there.
Well, they do have that draft capital, though, that could be used in a trade.
They do. And there's also some guys. There probably is some defensive end on somebody's practice squad. Tyrus Wheat, maybe on Dallas's practice squad. There is some, the same way the Cardinals picked off Quantrez, they could pick off a defensive end in a week or 2 from some other practice squad. I'll have to do a deep dive this weekend and take a look at some of these defensive ends on practice squads. But that's the move that I'm expecting to come at some point in the next month or so.
Don't forget Robert Beal Jr., too. He's going to come
I love.
IR. Yeah. I mean, it has the perfect physical skill set.
Right.
To succeed in a system where everything around him is taken care of, right? Normally you would say, okay, hey, this guy's a rookie. He didn't really produce that much in college. But like you said, these guys have Bosa. These guys have Hargrave. These guys have Armstead. I can't think of a better situation in a wide 9 with Chris Kosarek to just plug in an athlete and let him get after it. And I thought he looked good in really limited time, but his hamstring was bothering him all of camp. So they said, okay, let's shut him down. IR. We have 8 designation spots, for return, and he's going to be one of the 8. Bring him back when he's fully healthy, and I think Robert Beal can make some noise on a depth level for the 49ers.
I agree. And I asked Drake in preseason, I said, Drake, give me your thoughts on being on this line. And he's like, before I could even get the question out, he's like, truly blessed. Yeah. And that's the thing. Anybody who's a defensive end would die. They would probably pay their own airfare to fly to San Francisco to play on this D-line with Hargrave and Armstead and Chris and Nick Bosa. I mean, Chris calling the shots. So they'll have some options. It's not a dire situation, but whoever's going to be in opposite Nick is going to get one-on-ones all year, and it's going to pile up some stats.
Larry, you're going to get a kick out of this. I always like comments like this. Lombardi and Krueger are starting to sound like those analysts that reach for any little thing to discredit the 49ers. We just spent 58 minutes and 24 seconds talking about how good the roster is, and you're still going to get comments like that. I just thought that was funny.
I know.
It doesn't matter what you say these days. It does not matter. People are still going to shoot.
There's another one in here. Luke Luna says, Larry acts like these edge defenders don't need to play the run. He acts like Farrell was brought here just to be a pass rusher. He knows he just leaves it out. No, it's not that they don't. They are going to play the run. I mean, they do playing the run is part of it, but this whole wide nine is
thing
get
with
up the
Farrell,
field.
right? That is the kind of he's the base down
and he's
guy.
a good player. He's a good player. I'm just saying that look what they had. I mean, they had Bosa last year, and they had Drake last year, and still 3 guys not named Bosa or Drake played 91 snaps in the playoffs on average. All I'm saying is they paid for Hargrave, and it was great to do it, but they gave away some of their quality veteran depth there, and they may have to replenish it along the way.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we're about to run up into time here, man. This was fun. We're doing this every week, by the way. Next week we'll be back on your channel. I'm guessing next week we have a standard week, right? So we'll do Tuesday. I'm guessing next week.
Yeah, next Tuesday on the Krueger show. And thanks for having me on, Dave. It's a pleasure. And man, you do a great job. What are you writing about this week? I mean, obviously you're going to write a game story, but do you write anything like normally going into the game? Do you have like a story coming out tomorrow? Yeah. What's your story going into the game?
Coming out tomorrow. It's an unusual week, so my bigger story will be coming out tomorrow.
What's the angle?
Normally it comes out Friday before the game, but this time we didn't have time. I'm talking about the massive advantage the 49ers should have D-line against the Giants O-line, and how the one kind of equalizer potentially here for the Giants is zone read. That's the way we started the show. That's how we could end it. If the Giants are able to run with Daniel Jones and the 49ers aren't ready for zone read, you might be able to toss some of the advantages the 49ers have out at the window. But if you can't toss those advantages out the window, well, the Giants don't have their left tackle, Andrew Thomas. And again, they gave up 39 pressures to the Cowboys. And why don't we zoom out here? It is the 49ers, it is the Cowboys, and it's the Eagles gunning for this in the NFC right now. Cowboys have looked damn good the first couple of weeks of the season. Week 5, Larry, I mean, I can't wait, because it's very, very likely you see the 4-0 49ers hosting the 4-0 Cowboys. Sunday Night Football, Fleet Week in San Francisco. It will put a cap to the biggest week of the year in the city. It's going to be crazy. I think that's going to happen, because I think that you see these two excellent defenses roaring right now, and you already saw what the Cowboys did to the Giants, and I think the 49ers are going to do something similar to New York tomorrow night.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it's a weird dynamic too, is that Micah Parsons keeps talking up Brock Purdy. It's like Micah Parsons is talking a big game, but yeah, Dallas, it's amazing. Even though I don't have a real great vibe for Jerry Jones or his son, they've done a really nice job in the last few years at accumulating talent, and they're the ultimate bully team. If they get up 14 on you, they got a ton of pass rushers, they got corners that can pick off passes, and things start to avalanche against you. But I really think the Niners are built to beat Dallas, because I think Dallas is a one running back team, and Dallas is also a team that I don't think can stop the Niner run game. So I think that, to me, that's a real basic game plan. It's run the ball some more, and then hit the heck out of Tony Pollard, and hope, like Jimmy Ward did, hopefully you knock him out, because I mean, there's, to me, where Dallas gets really scary, and where this year goes, is if Dallas gets Jonathan Taylor. If somehow the Colts move Jonathan Taylor to Dallas before the trade deadline, then you're going to have me, then I'm nervous. I'm officially nervous. Until that point, I feel pretty good.
Well, it's been 2 straight years the 49ers have taken out the Cowboys in the playoffs, so clearly they have some sort of edge, and I think the Niners have only gotten better this year. You could say the Cowboys got better. Well, Hargrave's now a 49er. McCaffrey's now been a 49er for a year. I mean, We're coming up on 16 or 17 full games of Christian McCaffrey. He's at about 13 right now. I cannot wait to tally his statistics after he's at game 17. It's going to be close to 1,000. It's going to definitely be 1,000 rushing, and I think he's at 500 or 600 receiving right now. So,
well, the Niners are 14-1 since acquiring McCaffrey, and they've won 14 in a row, because didn't they lose the Kansas City game, the first game he was there?
Yeah, so in games that Christian McCaffrey has started and the 49ers actually finished with a quarterback who can throw a forward pass, they're undefeated. Yeah. I think that's
He's scored a touchdown now in 11 straight games. The only 49er player with a longer streak is Jerry himself, who had 12. The NFL record's 15, held by John Riggins and the Juice, O.J. Simpson. But McCaffrey is leading the NFL in rushing by a wide margin. He's got 268 yards. Bijan Robinson is second with 180. So
yeah, so he's on pace to break Eric Dickerson's record if this keeps up, which is 2,105 yards, and he's on pace for 2,200. I get it. They're probably going to ease off the workload. The one stat I got to tell you, he has 200 yards after contact on runs to the outside. We have played 2 games. He has 200 yards after contact. Like, most running backs in this league would die to have 200 yards after 2 games, period. He has 200 after contact only on outside runs in 2 games. Like,
he's a tough guy. He also had a gouge out of his tricep in the last game, and the thing's hemorrhaging, and the guy's working on it, and he's just like he's talking to somebody over here, and somebody's like, he's holding up his tricep, and the guy's like cleaning it out and putting the Band-Aid on it, and it's like, does he wear one of those pads or the tape? No, he's just like, you know what, I don't care. He was the perfect addition at the right time for the Niners. And I mean, think about it. They were so disappointing in that NFC Championship game, but if there was a highlight from that game, it was his touchdown run. So
it was a manly touchdown.
That was an incredible touchdown run.
11.
Yeah.
It was crazy. I thought, when he ran that in, I'm like, if they could just take care of the football, if they could just play this to, hold serve offensively, they might have a chance, because their defense might be able to give them one in the second half. But obviously Josh Johnson then got hurt. And even before Josh Johnson got hurt, he was playing so poorly that they weren't going to be able to hold serve. But that one touchdown, I think it made it 14-7.
It was anybody's ball game. Yeah.
Yeah, it made me think. Yeah, they just needed slightly better quarterback play, which is why I'm going to carry this to the grave. If they had Brock Purdy healthy that whole game, I think they win that going away. But Philadelphia,
I believe that too. And there'll be Eagle people that will interview us in a few weeks and use our sound bites to fire up their fans.
Yes. Well, we'll leave it at that then. Anyway, everybody go check out Larry's channel, The Krueger Show. That's how you find it on YouTube. Doing a great job out there. I had that. I didn't get to see it, but I saw that you were interviewing the new cornerback yesterday. I just forgot his name.
The new Anthony Brown. Well, what's funny? I did a video before I left the house on Anthony Brown, and then we're in the locker room, and I turned around, and he's standing right there, and he was talking to Cam Inman, and nobody else was talking to him. And so as soon as Cam was done, I'm like, "Hey, Anthony, you got a minute?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." And he's a really nice guy, and it was a very popular video. I think like 15,000 people watched it, and appreciate that. And loving doing the Krueger Show, man. Loving the whole YouTube experience. It's been fantastic collabing with guys like yourself. It's a joy, and we'll see you tomorrow night at the game, and we'll see you next Tuesday on the Krueger Show.
Yeah, for sure. All right, thanks, Larry. You take care, everybody. We will see you all later. We'll talk to you next time and in next week with Larry over on his channel. Take care.